Hi, I'm Ron. Thanks for checking this out. The last few videos, we've been looking at some specific fingering patterns that produced very particular modes and scales, and then we've talked a little bit about how we might be able to use them on our flutes. Today we're going to take a slightly different approach, and I hope that this is going to help us explore even more possibilities on our flute, but do it in maybe a little more intuitive kind of way. So, grab your favorite flute in A, and let's get started. We're going to look at a couple of places in the range of our flute where we have interesting, simple fingering options that really offer a lot of modal possibilities on our flute and open up a lot of flexibility for our playing. Before we get to that, though, I just want to take a little bit of time to thank all of you who have subscribed to the channel over the past few months. It's been really encouraging for me, and a lot of you have also left kind comments in the box and helpful suggestions and very, very interesting questions. And I really appreciate it. So thank you. I want to say a special thank you to Johnny Lipford, who's a younger and very talented colleague of mine. Johnny left a really kind comment along the way as well. Now, he's been on YouTube a lot longer than I have. You probably already know his work, but if you don't, be sure to check out his channel. We're going to take this mode as our starting point. We're going to do that mainly because it's the first thing most people learn to play on their Native American style flute, and it's so familiar that many players just call it basic scale. I'm going to refer to it as beginner mode. So when I say beginner mode, that's the mode that I mean. Now, I number the fingerings for beginner mode 1 through 6 with 1 at the bottom. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Today we are interested in 2 places within that mode, and we're going to look at 3 fingerings plus an alternate fingering that will offer us some extra pitches that we can then add to or substitute into our beginner mode. And once you have these fingerings under control, you can mix and match them as you wish, any way that sounds good to you, to create a lot of different modal patterns. Let's look at the bottom of our flute's range first. Now, of course, one way that we can get extra notes all the way through our flute range is to partially uncover holes as we go, maybe something like this. Now, I'm planning an entire video on half-holing and all the good things it can do for us, so let's leave that possibility aside for now. And the first fingering that we're going to look at is this one. Now, we've actually considered this fingering before. You might remember last month, this fingering was part of the scale that we learned for our 2 seasonal solstice songs, right? But today we're going to think of it simply as a possible substitute for our regular fingering 2 in beginner mode. Right? Now, I'm going to play a simple little phrase here, and the first time, okay, a really stock phrase, the first time through I'm going to use regular fingering 2, and the second time through I'm going to use substitute fingering 2. That's what we're calling it for today anyway, and see what you think of it. So you can hear how just that simple change really changes the character and feeling of that phrase pretty dramatically. Now, most listeners hear alternate 2 as being a brighter sound and regular 2 as being a darker sound. But, however you hear it, consider that simply by using that fingering, you now have a simple alternate mode with a different character from our regular beginner mode. So you can use one or the other, or even go back and forth in the same song. Here's a simple 3-phrase improv. In the first phrase, I'm going to use alt 2, and then in the last phrase, I'll switch to regular 2. And I think one of the most beautiful examples of going back and forth between the two in a solo flute track is the classic track Daybreak Vision from R.C. Nakai's Canyon Trilogy album. So stream that, give it a listen, and see if you can tell where he's using this fingering, what we're calling alternate 2 along the way, and where he's using regular 2. Because otherwise it's pretty much a beginner mode kind of song, right? But he really makes the changes very beautiful and very, very effective. If you want to hear that in the context of a more contemporary full band kind of track, you can check out my track, Why a Search. And you'll hear a similar kind of switch back and forth within the song. Now, Nakai's track, he's using a medium flute in G. So if you want to play along with that track, grab your flute in G. On my track, I'm playing on a high B flute. So grab a high B flute if you want to try to play along with that track. The other place in our beginner mode that we're going to look at today is between fingerings 4 and 5. Now, when we go from 4 to 5, that produces a pretty large musical space, and the fingerings we're going to look at partially fill in that space. Again, we've looked at these fingerings in other contexts before of learning specific scale or mode patterns, but today we want to approach them simply as variables that we can mix and match to intuitively create new patterns on our flute. So first, let's remember this fingering. Notice that this fingering requires us to lift the ring finger on our top hand. If you've ever only played beginner mode, this will be new to you and it may feel strange and difficult. It probably will need a little practice. So a nice way to practice this is kind of isolate it within the scale and play maybe a little pattern like this just to get your fingers used to the idea. When I show you these things, I move my fingers more than I normally would when I'm playing just to make sure you can see them. But we've talked before about keeping your fingers close to home to make things as easy as possible. Now, once you feel comfortable with that fingering, just consider it as something that you can add to beginner mode any place in the tune that it sounds good to you. I'm going to start again with that really stock phrase that I used before and just see where it might go, and I'll try to add this in along the way. So you see here what a nice extra color that adds into that beginner mode whenever we want to use it. Now, of course, you could also substitute this alternate 2 fingering and add this, and now we have just a really interesting sounding mode that you don't hear terribly often. With a really distinctive character. All right, so if you've always just played in beginner mode, basic scale if you want to call it that, just by adding these 2 fingerings, right, our substitute 2 and this addition up here, you've gone from having just one mode to play in to having 4 different modes with different characters to explore. So this is such a quick and easy way to open up your playing to a lot of new possibilities, a lot of new different characters, and a greater expressive range. Let's add one more. This is really 2 fingerings. We can use either this or this. On many of my flutes, these fingerings actually produce pitches that are very, very close together, and this flute is a good example of that. You can probably hear that this one sounds ever so slightly higher. On some of my flutes, the difference between the two is really much more pronounced, and oftentimes neither of these fingerings will exactly match a key on a keyboard, but we don't really care about that at the moment. And of course, I can adjust things with my breath if I needed, but really I'll use these fingerings pretty much interchangeably, and a lot of times which one I'll choose at any given moment is more about which is easier to use in the line I'm playing. I might even use both fingerings in the same phrase, maybe a phrase like this. Now again, I can add this fingering to my regular beginner mode. I can also add it, of course, to my new alternate beginner mode. So now, simply by mixing and matching these few fingerings, we have 6 modes that we can explore, each with its own character and its own color. Here they are. Here's number 1. But wait, we can double that, and without even learning any more fingerings. Remember last video when we were learning a couple of solstice seasonal songs, one of the songs was Once in Royal David's City. Now, one way of thinking about the scale we learned to play that song is that we started off in beginner mode and used alternate 2 and then added this. And the result ended up like this. But you probably also remember that one of the really cool things about this song is that the center of gravity for this song is not the bottom note of the flute. This melody wants to end in the middle of the flute. It wants to end here instead of the bottom. Remember? Now, what is cool is that we can make melodies that want to do this using any of the modes that we've explored today. With any of them, we can make melodies that want to end on the bottom note of the flute, and we can make other melodies that want to end in the middle of the flute. In effect, this doubles the number of modes we have available to us. So now, just by learning 3 new fingerings, plus an alt fingering, by feeling free to mix and match them in any way that sounds good to us, and feeling free to change the center of gravity of our melodies, we have gone from just having beginner mode or basic scale to having at least 12 modes to explore, each with its own unique character and color. We can change modes from one song to the next. We can even change modes within the same song if it sounds good to us. Maybe each day, choose one mode to practice a little bit. Maybe just start playing up and down the mode and then maybe improv a short melody in that mode. You could start just by simply decorating the mode a little bit as you go up and down. So let's say today I want to practice this mode. I am going to use regular 2, and I'm going to add this to it, and then I'm going to try to find a melody that wants to end here instead of on the bottom of the flute. So maybe I'll start out just practicing going up and down that scale a little bit, but beginning and ending here so I can get used to this as an arrival point. And then maybe I'll just start decorating that scale a little bit as I move around, and I'll end up with a melody. You get the idea. Now, a lot of students come to me complaining that all of their songs sound alike. Learn these easy extra fingerings, gradually work them into your playing, and hear how your flute playing will open up and your range of expression will grow. It really is worth the effort. We haven't even talked about upper register or rhythm yet. Today, I have intentionally not used keyboard maps or interval numbers. I've also not named any of the modes that we've been playing with, aside from our overly familiar basic scale, which I'm officially lobbying to rename beginner mode, by the way. Trying to name everything we play sometimes is just an extra layer of memorization that we don't really need, and sometimes it can actually be quite limiting. Almost all of the naming that we hear in musical discussions these days is actually borrowed from Euro-classical music theory. So when you hear a jazz or pop musician, for example, talk about 2-5-1 progressions, that's a concept and vocabulary that's been borrowed from Euro-classical music theory. When we put our pitches onto keyboard maps, or we talk about intervals of majors and minor thirds, or major and minor chords, we talk about minor pentatonic mode or Dorian mode, all of those, again, are concepts and vocabulary that we're borrowing from Euro-classical music theory. Now, I taught that theory upper division at university level and composition for many, many years. So I know that system really well, and I know how beautiful and effective and valuable it can be, how useful it can be for us as musicians. But it should also be obvious that Euro-classical music theory has been imposed here, and that a lot of our university music training patterns remain extremely ethnocentric. So in other words, indigenous music making in the Americas, and in lots of other places as well, of course, evolved perfectly well for many thousands of years without any help from Euro-classical music theory. And yet still, that way of music making is often held up as some kind of objective standard that we're all supposed to aspire to. So if my flute, for example, plays a pitch that system doesn't have a way to name, or that pitch falls between the cracks of the piano keys, I must be playing out of tune. It can't be that I'm playing exactly what I intend to play and that my flute plays it very, very well. A well-respected professional orchestral oboe player once said to me about my flutes, "I don't know why you keep playing those silly things when they can't even play a real scale." Now, of course, this person had been really highly trained. They were extremely capable on their instrument. But because of their training, they had a very narrow, I'm tempted to say extremely limited idea about what a real scale is. But we are playing an instrument that has grown from a very different way of making music. Why should I care if your limited theory doesn't have a name for the scale that I'm playing? Why should I care if your limited notation system doesn't have a way of accurately representing the pitch I'm playing or the rhythm patterns I'm playing? Now, we can certainly find beautiful, exciting ways of making music together, but please, that needs to come from mutual respect and not from trying to force me and my instrument to conform to the limitations of your theory system. So at least for a while, don't worry about what any of the modes we've been playing today might or might not be called. Just take these fingerings, get comfortable with them, mix and match them as you wish, and enjoy the results. What it might be called in one music theory system or another doesn't matter nearly as much as that you can play it, that you can hear it, that you can make cool music with it, and that you can enjoy yourself while you're doing it. As Duke Ellington said, if it sounds good, it is good. Have fun. I'll see you again next time.